Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to present this topic that's so close to my heart. Just this last Sunday, I had the opportunity to be here in South Bend, visiting a Hispanic parish and visiting the youth group over there. There were about 30 Hispanic young adult kids. And the homework for that day was due. The homework was to bring who were their parents. What journey did their parents take into this country? What was their past like? So all the kids shared briefly, oh yeah, my parents crossed the border, yeah. That's as much as they were sharing. And suddenly we got into this little kid, 13-year-old Jose. He goes, well, actually, my parents didn't cross the border. I crossed it. I crossed it 6 months ago. I walked 10 days in the desert, hiding from police, and finally got to the United States and meet for the first time in 13 years my father. We were all quiet. I was quiet, and I hear these stories all the time in my ministry. Why was I quiet? What did it take Jose to open his heart in front of that group? Number one, they were speaking his language, Spanish. Number two, he felt welcome and comfortable. So that's what I want to talk about. What is the huge need of having intercultural competent ministers? And I'm going to frame it all around these three statistics. We've been talking about youth and young adults these whole 3 days. We might have not dissected yet who are they by culture. 60% of Catholics under the age of 18 are Hispanic. 60%. Nearly 1 in 4 Hispanic adults already left the church. Brand new statistic. I learned it just 6 months ago with Hoffman Ospino at the convocation at USCCB in July. 1 out of 4 already left the church. Many times we think of Hispanics as the low-hanging fruit. There's thousands of them. We don't know what to do with them. And yet, 1 out of 4 already left the church. And they left to be nuns, not to be Protestants. And the other statistic I want to share is 9% of ecclesial ministers are Hispanic. So we have these millions, thousands of Hispanic youth, and only 9% of the leaders are Hispanic or bicultural or competent in their culture. So what are we going to do between now and when we get up to maybe 50% of the lay ecclesial leaders, which will be decades from now, maybe centuries, to form those leaders? And it is our first priority, right, Father Capó? That's what he does for a living. He raises bicultural, bilingual, young adult Hispanic leaders. But between now and then will be decades. So meanwhile, we need to do the ministers we have right now in youth ministry, intercultural competent. And not only the youth ministers, but everyone else around them. Just a snapshot. There is a huge rise of the non-European communities in the United States. Half of the adults are white, but as you can see, 38%, 40% are Hispanic, which is the green, 4% Asian, 3% Black, 1% American Indian. So there is a rise in those ethnic groups. And again, here is more of a close-up onto the Hispanics. 55% of all Catholics under the age of 30, we're talking the millennials, are Hispanic. But who are they? Are they migrants? Only 10% of them are migrants. So we're talking that the huge bulk are second, third generation Hispanic. They were already born in the United States. 90% of them born, 75%, 15 were brought as they were little kids, the dreamers, yeah? So 90% of these 55 are already American. They already speak English. Their first language in school is English, but the first language in their heart and in their faith is Spanish. And they still identify with the culture of their parents. They were dragged into mass into Spanish. But as young adults, they don't feel like part of one group or the other group. And yet we're not welcome in either one of those two groups. And that's the reality we have right now in Galveston-Houston. We have 30 beautiful young adult groups, Pastoral Juvenil in Spanish. We have beautiful 30 or so in English. And I have 90% of my young adults who are bilingual, bicultural, second generation, who don't fit in either one of them. So what are we doing to make them feel welcome? 33% of our parishes in the United States are already shared multicultural parishes. And what that means is they have a mass in other language than English. The population in the pews is changing, but the leadership is not. The programs are not. So what are we going to do? Nuns. Just a snapshot of the nuns. Today was presented earlier in St. Mary's Press study from 2017. She didn't show this graph, but it's in the same little booklet going on. Who are these youth people, these young adults leaving the church? 44% are white, 36% are Hispanic, 12% are black, and 8% are other race. They did ask them, why did you leave? Hispanics mainly answered because they were not welcome. It was not because they had a problem with the doctrine of the church or they didn't like the homilies of the priest or anything else. It's just simply they weren't welcome, the majority of them. Mark Gray told me that through email. So, what is to be intercultural competent? Little 101 on intercultural competency. It is a capacity to communicate, relate, and work across cultural boundaries. It's a little joke over there. You won't have any problem working with us here at Global. We treat everyone the same. And he answers, I think we just struck our first problem. One size doesn't fit all. Yes, that paradigm of 1950s America, the church in America of trying to make people assimilate to our culture is still in place, guys. It's not back 50 years ago. That still happens in my diocese all over the place. You're welcome to our church, you're welcome to my group, as long as you leave your culture at the door. And yet, we're striving for integration where everyone can bring their gift and richness of each other. Integration is different than assimilation. Evangelization is not Americanization. So there is 3 areas to be intercultural competent, and they're so easy. Really, this type of workshop could be accomplished in 8 hours. There's 3 areas: knowledge, skills, and attitude. Knowledge is to get to know the culture. You don't need to know perfect Spanish, or you don't even need to know Spanish to be intercultural competent. You need to know the culture, what they like, what food they like, what icons, what music are they attracted to. Skills, those are obtained as you go, and the attitude, which is the biggest one. You may have all the knowledge and skills you want, but if you don't have the attitude of openness, curiosity, of love, then you don't have any of the other 2. These are 6 stages used by several pastors. This little beautiful booklet put a couple years ago by USCCB is titled Best Practices for Shared Parishes. And it's just the best practices of a lot of pastors who have accomplished through integration in their parish. They say a person, this is like a grieving process, might identify in one of these 6 stages. Denial. We don't have anyone who's not American in our parish. I don't see them. They're not there. That's denial. 2, defense. We have them. Let's make a little room for them. Maybe can they be trusted? Are they going to take over? Maybe they should go to the next parish. Yes? Number 3, minimizing. Okay, yes, we have them. Let's open the door to them. But if they live in America, they should be speaking English, right? Then is the threshold, the acceptance. It is when we offer them Mass in the language that they identify the most. And they may use our church and parish and parking lot as long as it's not in the same schedule than ours. Yes? Adaptation, finally, is when the pastor and the staff in the parish or the diocese is intercultural competent. And they start opening programs that are bilingual or bicultural. They're open to everyone's reality. And it's more of a we, not they type of language in that parish. And finally is the integration. Integration is what we're all shooting for. Integration is where everyone, every culture from that parish sits in the parish council and makes decisions together. So Pope Francis keeps talking to us about theology of encounter. It's all over if you read the preparatory document of the Synod, and it's all over in Evangelii Gaudium. Theology of encounter. He's asking us to listen first before we serve, before we accompany the youth, and I think we already hammered that this morning. We need to listen to them first. And this helps us to evangelize the youth and the young adults of any culture. Yes? Theology of encounter also means we don't only encounter Christ in Jesus himself, but in others. I will see the gifts that Colin has as part of my gifts. I'll see the suffering of Bishop over there sitting as my sufferings. We truly see each other as one body of Christ. If we truly believe we were all baptized, are part of one body, then we're no one to be saying, welcome to my church. If everyone's already baptized, part of one body, we're no one to say, welcome to my house. We're already part of one house. Mi casa is su casa. So this is a very slow process. and it takes years, and it takes a lot of work. But it's achievable, and when we achieve it, we create genuine friendships that will change our ministry life. In Archdiocese, we started 7 years ago a pastoral plan, and before we sat down, we all had our stakeholders. I want a more young adult ministry, and someone else wanted more of Catholic education, and we all wanted something, until the Spirit arrived and said, look, go for what John Paul said, St. John Paul II, in year 2000 in Novo Millennio in Eunte. He addressed his own diocese in Rome and said, before any programs are established, let's live a spirituality of communion. And what that means is, I am not you, you are not me, but I am not me without you, and you're not you without me. That's simple. We've been trying to live it. 7 years later, we're not there yet. Finally, this is a very important slide because it really summarizes what we're trying to achieve with young adult ministry, even with or without the cultural components. These are 3 stages of integration of a young adult in a parish. We welcome them, we make them feel like they belong, and finally they take ownership over their own ministry. Let's start by welcoming. How are we welcoming right now youth and young adults in our parishes? By telling them there is only one program that will feed them. How are we welcoming them? In my parish, in St. Jerome in Houston, we are very hospitable. We're known to be very hospitable. Every Mass, we make them stand up, anyone who's new in the parish, and we give them a bookmark. And we applaud. And we are rated as one of the most hospitable parishes in Houston. But that's as much as we do to welcome a person. We give them a bookmark. Right? What do we do to welcome young adults or youth in our parishes? It's just a question to throw out there. How can we welcome them, not just being hospitable? Second, how do we make them feel like they belong? How do we use their gifts and talents in the parish council? How do we use the gifts and talents coming together with a project service, not just giving it to them, but making them feel like they're part of it, that they truly belong? And finally, the hardest one is shared ownership. How are we all co-responsible of the ministry and not just given to us? So share ownership is when neither group loses their identity, but each group takes the best elements from other group. So we don't lose our identity. Every year we have together a young adult day. It's not a conference, it's like a retreat mixed with a conference and service. And it's a multicultural team. Is it easy? No. Not everyone speaks Spanish, not everyone speaks English, there's a lot of translation going on. But if you only saw the transformation of that team every year, it's a new team. How the white Anglo young adults learn from the Filipino ones, from the African American ones, from the Hispanic ones. And at the end, the product of that day is really a product of them, is their creation. And everyone brings their gifts, and they learn from each other. So I'll give you an example about welcoming, belonging, and ownership. My last name is Polish. Yeah, I'm from Mexico, but I'm married Polish. Had the blessing to be in Poland several times. The first time I went there, they made me feel very welcome. They gave me lots of sausage, lots of chocolates, and lots of teddy bears. I was super welcome, yeah? And that's how I came back with the feeling of being welcome. By the next trip, 2 years later, I was allowed to cook in the kitchen of my mother-in-law. Cook in her kitchen, you know? I felt like I belonged. I was not just a guest in her house, but I was belonging. Well, the last trip, I was allowed to buy food, put it in her fridge, open the fridge whenever I wanted, and cook. I felt like I was owning her kitchen. Yes? Shared ownership. Those are the levels that we need to do with young adults in our parishes, in our ministries. And if we go a little bit farther in the cultural aspect, how are we going to welcome a second-generation Hispanic? There is no books yet written on that. It is something that we're really learning as we go. How are we going to welcome a professional Hispanic in a group of maybe immigrants who feel threatened by that Hispanic who just arrived in their group? And vice versa, how is that new lawyer or new doctor coming into a young Catholic professional group, which is mainly white, and feel comfortable in that group? So my job in the Archdiocese is to make everyone intercultural competent, not just the white part, but the other side too. Equally intercultural competent to serve both sides of the coin. So just best practices, where can we start? Obviously, offer intercultural competency courses. I was just in the seminary last week giving this exact class to seminarians. In 7 years, that's all they receive to be intercultural competent. Yeah. In 7 years, that's all they learn on how to be intercultural competent. And yet you go to the 5th encuentro process in my diocese, and what you hear from people is, oh, in my parish, we have tons of things for Hispanics. Oh, really? Who's your pastor? Oh, he's open to that culture. While others is like, oh, we barely have mass, and we're not allowed to do anything. Well, maybe that pastor needs some intercultural competence, teaching or learning. We need to do a lot more of these type of workshops. This book is $8, 40 pages long, English and Spanish. I highly recommend it. So be aware of your own cultural heritage. Like we were talking yesterday, if we don't know where we're from, we don't know where we're going or who we are. So just let's make ourselves aware of our own cultural heritage. Avoid thinking of your culture as better than others and use the we language instead of they language. Practice theology of encounter in our daily life. Go out for coffee from someone who's not from your culture. Learn what do they like, how do they celebrate Christmas, how do they pray. Also, all of the events that you have in your diocese or your parish, advertise them bilingually, even if the program is only in English or if it's only in Spanish. That is the first step to make someone feel welcome. And not only that, but their grandpas, their mothers, their dads, because the youth are not sitting in the pews, will read it in their language and invite their children to these events. It's happened before that they come and go, hey, how do you hear about it? It's like, oh, my mom read in Spanish, and even though I speak English, I'm here. So make all of these events flyers bilingual. It's a lot of work, yes, double the cost, yes, but that's how we do it. And talking about that, I want to share this model because it's not only a diocesan model, but it could be used in any parish on Young Adult Day. So it is a day in which everyone's welcome. We have Mass, mainly in English, but we have some Spanish songs, maybe some psalm is told in Tagalog, and we have different icons of different virgins that represent different cultures, so everyone feels welcome and part of that Mass. So we have prayer together, we have activities together. We always use those translators or those bridge builders to help us translate among those who don't speak English or Spanish. And then we have moments of formation in the language that they prefer, whatever they feel comfortable with. That's something you could be done in a parish. You don't need to create, if you want to create, and Kathleen was saying earlier today, let's do a Spanish, English, and a bilingual, as long as you always keep them together at some point during the week or during the month. That's what you want. You don't want to create separation, but unity, and yet serve the realities. This is a picture of our choir. I change a choir every year, and they don't like me because if they know they speak Spanish, they only know Spanish songs, I make them learn English songs. And if they only speak English, then I make them learn Spanish songs because that's the way it works in the Young Adult Day. We need to serve both cultures. This is my team. At the end, they're all happy they achieved that huge challenge. And then a couple other best practices. Enable people of every language to participate in parish cultural celebrations and feasts. How many times we advertise Our Daily Guadalupe only in Spanish? And no one knows it's happening. Or I was telling Colin, all my Hispanic young adults don't know about St. Patrick's Day because no one has ever given them any information or translated the events happening in the Anglo part of the world. Continue being involved in the encuentro process. It is a beautiful process. If you read the little booklet, it will take you by the hand on how to go out of the door and be a missionary disciple. Not only the Hispanics, but everyone is welcome to do that. And I want to hammer a little bit more on finding our bilingual and bicultural leaders to act as bridge builders. We need to find those Hispanic young adults who already know both cultures that can bridge between both cultures and form them in ministry, and not only in ministry, but in university as well. Only 15% of students across the country in the university or the 4-year level higher education are Hispanic. Only 15%. It took me 5 years to get one young adult through a master program of theology in Houston. One in 5 years. Because the other ones didn't have an undergraduate degree, they were not qualifying for it, or they didn't speak English. So we really need to find those bicultural, bilingual bridge builders in our communities. Become acquainted with these documents I'm talking about. The handout was given to you with all the different statistics and sources. Also, there's excellent networks and trainings. We have La Red, National Catholic Network, the Pastoral Juvenil Hispana. We have Instituto Fe y Vida, who've been doing this for 20 years or more. The Southeast Pastoral Institute with Father Capó. They train people on how to serve first, second, third generation Hispanics. St. Mary's University has a Hispanic ministry training for young adults in colleges. And I would like to finish my presentation by reading this quote from Evangelii Gaudium. When properly understood, cultural diversity is not a threat to the church unity, if it's properly understood. It is the Spirit who brings forth a rich variety of gifts, while at the same time creating a unity which is never uniformity, but a multifaceted and inviting harmony. So now, I'll have this reflection question for you. Meanwhile, we're gonna have a bishop sing for us. Yes, to wake up after lunch. So how are we welcoming and fostering a sense of belonging for youth and young adults from other cultures in our ministry? Since 55% of them below the age of 30 are Hispanic, and 90% of those were born and raised in the United States. How are we welcoming? And those, by the way, are the ones that we don't see in the pews. That exact population is the one we don't see in the pews. So how are we welcoming them?